All right, brother, here we go.
Here we go. This is a seasonally appropriate topic, I feel like.
Man, it is. So this would be, for all the listeners or viewers, a rather, they're all unscripted, but even more unscripted than normal, free-flowing sort of a conversation, loose, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
This was a question that was sent in maybe via the Very Not Random Instagram account from Julie M. She says, what about an episode on cold plunging? What are the benefits? Are there different protocols you should follow based upon your goals? Should I plunge before or after a workout? I'd love to hear all the details. And so we had that one, and as we were going back and forth about that, it kind of spiraled into a broader topic, which kind of something which caught your attention. So maybe you can, what did this question get rolling around in your brain?
Well, Pat, I think thematically it really drives back to what I believe you and I tend to land on pretty regularly, which is trying to identify what are the big picture elements that are truly going to make a difference in an individual's health and fitness, and trying to figure out how you can discern if and when adding something on top of that is going to be worth your time and effort. I think everybody's only got so many discipline chips, so to speak, that they can play at any one time. And in my opinion, especially the older and longer I'm into this stuff, I think you have to be a little bit selective about when and where you choose to spend those. And so, to get to the immediacy of the question, I think cold plunging is one of those things that I kind of have to laugh because it's really in vogue right now. It's been around forever. I think the first time I ever did a cold plunge type protocol was, in the early 2000s, probably 2003, 2004, something like that. So this is not new. And certainly there's many cultures. Yeah, there's many cultures that have been doing this for, millennia, literally. But it is seeming to be like a pretty in vogue thing. There's lots of claimed benefits from everything from increased recovery to, increased fat oxidation to better blood flow and circulation, on and on and on and on. I think your mileage would probably vary with a lot of those claims, but that does seem to be the focus of a lot of people right now. So. If you're interested in experimenting with it on a pragmatic level, I would say, try to get to about 10 minutes of exposure a week, and don't do it immediately following your workouts. That, from what I've heard, that's not the best idea to do immediately post-workout because you want the benefit of your workout. You don't want to shut that down immediately. But that's a pretty layman's approach, and I wouldn't take my word for that. I'm certainly no expert on this. But the broader topic is, is this even really worth your time?
We can get to the broader topic for sure. We like to plug her podcast every now and then, but EC's podcast of the Consistency Project, I almost lost it for a second there. I know that she did an episode or two on cold plunging specifically, and as she does, read the actual research and all of that. So I would recommend, if Julie's interested, Google or find the Consistency Project, cold plunge or ice bath, and find there's one or two episodes on that if you really want to nerd out on that. In her question, you're right, it's very much in vogue right now, and there are people that I listen to, podcasters that like to do it, and I think podcasters that have a lot of influence, they're starting to do something, it catches on like wildfire. But I did a little, research on this as well. And the funny thing is, if you want to call it just poking around Google research, but the funny thing is that I don't want to say that there wasn't really a consensus, but it was tough to find a consensus. There was some that said, you don't want to do it, before a workout, or if you do, you do it, first thing in the morning, make sure several hours go by, then you're going to work out. Should you do it, post just a heavy day session compared to a mixed modality, high intensity sort of a session? Some had pros and cons to either one of those. Some had, depending upon what I read online to what I see on social media with, people of influence and whatnot, some of the stuff I read online, if I can call it up real quick, I tried to save some of the pages, with regards to temperature, said something like 58 degrees, or, here we go, fill your bath with water that's no colder. Do not go colder than 53 degrees. And if you're new to ice baths, start at 68 degrees, which a lot of people that are like hardcore ice baths, like, you'll see on social media, they're breaking the ice with like a Viking axe or something like that. And, like it's literally like a glacier. The water's in the 30s sort of a degree.
Yeah.
So the discrepancy even on temperature, there doesn't seem to be any hard and fast actual like, this is the way. Like the difference between being in the 30s and being 68, it's a 30-degree temperature swing. That's massive there. And everything from, if you're in the really cold water, you're in it for 3 minutes and then you get the heck out, to it's the colder water, could be up to, 10 minutes or one, again, depending upon where you look online. And how soon it should or shouldn't be done after your workout, because, one of the things that is both a benefit, but then some people say to be careful with the benefit, is that it constricts or reduces blood flow to the area, and therefore it helps reduce inflammation. But then I can find contrary articles that are like, your body's natural response to a workout is that inflammation is a good thing. You want the blood bringing oxygen and you want inflammation there, and you don't want to restrict that. So truth be told, I feel like if I was to stand here and click on the microphone and say, all right, Julie, I got the hard and fast answers for you. I did a lot of research, and it's really clear that this is the way. I don't see it, and maybe that data will come with more research. But right now, as far as Julie's question goes, I can't tell you that I found a singular protocol that is widely accepted as the one. And that's, so take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll say anecdotally, I've messed around with this sort of thing for a long time, and I enjoy it. I'll also say in the same sentence that I think so much of it is performative, as you alluded to. You've got recommendations that the water actually doesn't need to be like crazy cold. And yet, everybody these days seems to be taking things to such extremes. I think it kind of echoes the idea of how much volume the average person really needs to train with to see progress. I think you and I are both pretty strong proponents that it doesn't need to be crazy. The weekly allowance for what it actually takes to drive somebody's progress is probably a lot less than what most people consider when they look at the high level athlete. But because there are so many prominent voices doing these more extreme things, people are convinced that that has to be the way for them to receive any benefit. And I think this is no different. So that's kind of interesting. But again, to get back to it, I've experimented with a lot of protocols, and the most extreme that I did was several years ago. It actually started as a challenge from Pat Barber, who called me up one day and said, "Hey, I'm going to do a cold shower every morning straight out of bed for 30 days. You want to do it with me?" And I was like, "Okay, sure." And then I roped David Osorio into doing it with me. And then the month came and went, and he and I, we had a little rivalry going. And I think he put it out to me. He's like, I'll keep doing it long after you break. And I was like, game on.
That's fantastic.
And so we ended up going for way too long. I think, if memory serves, I think he decided to do it for like 1,000 days, and I tapped out. I think it was around 500.
Wow.
So we're talking a year plus of every day doing a cold shower straight out of bed. That was the rule.
And I guess you're not quite sure what the water temp was. And I guess some purists would say, well, that wasn't full immersion, cheating Bosman.
I guess so. But at any rate, the point I'm trying to make is that as far as like real, could put my finger on it, drivers of performance and health, I couldn't really point to anything significant. As far as maybe the psychological element of finding a routine that was difficult and sticking to it and having the gumption to do that, yeah, that was great. And I'll also say the only other thing that kind of anecdotally came to mind was that I will say that I think there's some nervous system regulation that probably occurs when you expose yourself to something extreme like that. And to me, I think it's really akin to static stretching in the sense that, look, if you want to get flexible, I think static stretching is a way. I don't think it's particularly efficient. I think there's more viable ways to get, functionally flexible. weightlifting being a great example. A little load in those positions goes a lot further than just kind of sitting there passively. However, static stretching is wonderful for kind of regulating your nervous system, especially kind of down regulating it after intense activity, or, even if you're just kind of feeling frazzled. In the same way, I found that kind of cold water exposure to do that for me. It could kind of just keep the nervous system a little bit more regulated. Whether you're feeling low that morning, you got up, obviously it's going to blast you and kind of bring you back up.
Right.
Or if you're feeling a little anxious, it could kind of regulate that way too. So that was something that I noticed as an anecdotal thing. But again, I wouldn't say that was anything conclusive. And when I stopped, after a very, very long time of doing this every day, I didn't notice any significant relapse.
Well, that's interesting because some of the stuff that I found as well, I was at least happy that they tried to understand the difference between facts and opinions, because some things they said it definitely occurs, which makes sense. It certainly reduces your core temperature. It certainly can ease muscle soreness. But then it used words like may, which I like. They said it may help some people focus. It may help some people sleep better. So these are probably just claims that people feel like are happening, and they actually may be occurring, but they weren't able to conclusively say that this led to that. And so I at least appreciated the fact they would say may every now and then. I've never done any cold plunges like after a workout or stuff like that, but there is something to doing hard, uncomfortable things on a regular basis to, whether we would say it, build character, grit. Like there is something to that. And especially if those hard things that you're doing are voluntary, if you voluntarily have the discipline on a regular basis to do something that you find uncomfortable or unpleasant and you do it, there is actual benefit there, regardless of some of the other things. I think I would buy that. I will also say, just from a personal anecdotal story, as a former SEAL, too much cold water in my life, if somebody could conclusively prove to me beyond a shadow of a doubt that a daily cold plunge would add 5 quality years to my life, increase all my lifts by 20%, I wouldn't consider doing it for 2 seconds. Not at all. I mean,
how'd you feel?
Nope, not even remotely. You can get me in that water at gunpoint probably. But what's interesting is, back when that was like a part of my regular life, like going into cold water, I will say, doing voluntarily hard things, I was around a lot of hard individuals, and it's funny. I look back now at, like, regardless of temperature or conditions or whatnot, of myself and the rest of us, we're at the point mentally where we could just walk into the water and it didn't matter, and that is a special sort of hardness, mental hardness, quite frankly, which these days, shy of getting into a jacuzzi, I don't want any part of it, and so I think there is something to that, that mental grind and exposing yourself to that. But I don't know if it needs to be, cold water, or if what people are purporting cold water does, if it actually gives all those benefits. For me, it's kind of yet to be determined, even though I know there's some very vocal, well-educated, well-credentialed individuals that are shouting its benefits from the rooftops. I think it's not as much fact as is, everything makes it seem like it's fact, but I think there's more anecdotal and less fact than some of those claims would actually be found out to be.
Yeah, 2 things that you kind of jogged my thinking around, having that act of hard discipline. I agree that sometimes, with certain personalities in particular, having something like that you're going to commit to and just do it, it can spur you to other acts of discipline elsewhere in your life. That's very possible. And
the discipline can be contagious.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, I'm going to commit to waking up early and exposing myself to this really unpleasant thing. That can kind of spur you to do other things that require some discipline. That's true for some people. It's also goes the other way, though, where you may have some people that, they're going to do that, and it's going to dissuade them from other, maybe more important elements in their life. It's like, well, I checked the box. I got up and I did this thing. It was terrible. So yeah, maybe I do deserve like a hot cocoa a little bit later. You know what I mean? And it can kind of become self-defeating. So
Right.
there's a certain element of self-knowledge there that you kind of have to understand. And then the second thing you said there was just around the nature of the benefits or the purported benefits. Number one, you're saying like, okay, yeah, you did build up this tolerance, but now there's no way that you're going to want to go through that in order to, maybe achieve something or get some benefit on the other side. It's almost like we were talking about earlier. You spent those chips up front, and now there's no more of those chips to spend.
No interest in it whatsoever. None.
And that's not a great game to play if you're thinking about the rest of your life, right? So
right.
you have to consider that to some degree. And then the other thing that is kind of an offshoot of that, which I think is so popular these days with so many things, is that you may find some niche thing that becomes your thing, and that's fine. I think the problem, though, is when people find a niche thing that becomes their thing, is they try to post hoc rationalize why it is so important to continue doing and what the benefits are because of this thing. Mm-hmm. Whether or not it's actually a game changer, whether or not it's actually something critical that needs to be included in your routine, is secondary. It's like the proving factor needs to be important. So somebody can't just do it because they enjoy doing it. They have to have some perceived benefit around it, and it has to be quote unquote proven. And that's what I think is so interesting around something like Cold Plunge. And again, I'll go back to anecdotally. One of my favorite things to do when I'm able to do it is like a traditional bathhouse type treatment. The Russians are really good at this, the Finns, the Scandinavians, they've all got this down. They've been doing it forever. And one of the most pleasant things to do to end your day is to get really hot in the sauna, go dunk in the cold plunge. And we're not talking hang out there for a tough guy challenge. Mm-hmm. Dunk yourself in the cold plunge so you can get back in the sauna for a little bit longer. Do that a few times. You come out, you feel like $1,000,000, you're relaxed, and that's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to be this scientifically proven way to optimize health and fitness forever. Amen. It just needs to be something that feels good at the end of the day. And why isn't that enough? So
I think one of the true tests will be, is everybody still doing it in 5 years when the shine has worn off? Because if you think back,
the Finns will be.
If you think back, and somebody might of course be offended if I call it a fad, right? But if you think back of whatever the right word is, fad, or things that were in vogue at the moment to capture people's attention, there's like different phases in CrossFit. Do you remember when everyone was covered in like head to toe compression gear? Like that was the thing for like quite a while. Like it was head to toe, long sleeve pants and shirts for every workout, because you know what? That is what was needed to just maximize performance. And oh my goodness, the benefits are insane. I can't believe I wasn't wearing compression gear. It faded away. So it couldn't have been that amazing for every human being out there. Or physio tape. Do you remember when everyone was covered with every crevice of their body in physio tape? I mean, was crazy. Where did that go? If that was absolutely revolutionary and life-changing, it would still be happening, because who wouldn't want a significant bump in everything based upon the compression gear, the physio tape? So, and the cold plunge, it might be the real deal, to be quite honest with you. Everything that I've read, and I've listened to plenty of podcasts from people that love them, I'm not convinced. Yeah, it very well could be, but we shall see, and we'll see if it stands the test of time. And one of the things that maybe we could chat about quickly is at the beginning of the show, before we clicked on, which I think you were right on the money, that you were going to say, hey, whether it's even though we're having fun with this topic, like it is a genuine topic, whether it's the cold plunge, whether it's the physio tape, whether it's the compression gear, whether it's the working out with a mouth guard, or like whatever it happens to be, toe spacers, like you name it. Before you experiment with one of those things, and you're going to say that this is what swung my fitness in a certain direction, do you have your basics, your foundational building blocks, like staunchly in place, measurable, observable, repeatable? So when you add something else to the mix, you can say, this needle moved this much, and I can tell you it happened because of this. And, that was something you mentioned before the camera clicked on. And I think that is a good place for most people to start before they're like, hey, explore where you want to explore. But I would recommend that the foundation of your home is well built first.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the way I was thinking around it was a hierarchy of habits. if you don't have a real strong hierarchy of habits that involve basic discipline around working out X number of times a week, whatever that looks like to you, that's, working and continuing to bolster your progress. If that's not in place, well, then I think a lot of these other things are peripheral. Same thing around basic nutritional habits. Do you have a baseline of decent nutrition on a very regular basis where the opposite is the exception? We're talking once or twice a week. Maybe you kind of, treat yourself or whatever. But if that's an everyday thing and you're kind of freewheeling it on your nutritional front, well, then, some of these other things are probably not going to be as important. Are you getting to bed on time? Are you, managing that end of things? Those are probably the big three that I think almost everybody could agree on. And if one of those three is pretty sketchy, then I think a lot of these other things are going to be not really that important. So hierarchy of habits, I think, is a real big one for people to consider when they're, deciding whether or not they want to add something else to the mix.
And then, again, not to dissuade anybody, but lay that foundation, be really comfortable with that foundation, have it down pat, know what it's doing for you. And then if you add something to it, you can really make a pretty, for yourself anyway, a pretty darn honest assessment as to, the free time in your day is precious. And if you're going to spend a certain amount of time doing something else, is it moving the needle in a meaningful way that you think it's worth that, that use of your time, energy, and all that stuff, resources, money, things like that. So do that. But if Julie does it, I'd be curious to hear her thoughts on it.
I would too. And that leads me to kind of another thing that I think most people miss when they do adopt something new is that they don't go into it with a clear criteria of what should be assessed. So, if I just pick something, I'm going to ride my motorcycle every day for a month. And I'm going to determine whether or not that thing was actually worth doing. Before I start, it would be a good idea to kind of frame out some things that would lead me to a yes or a no. And they can be pretty rudimentary. They don't have to be, costly or overly scientific. It could be as simple as, did it improve my performance by just the basic workouts I'm doing in the gym? Is that like normal stuff moving in the right direction? What's happening on I hesitate to say the scale, but how about the body composition front? When I wake up in the morning and I look in the mirror day after day after day after day, what's the effect there? Is there any effect? Is it roughly the same? Did I, move positively or negatively? That's another great one. And then, it could be as simple as mood throughout the day. So, framing something around some simple criteria before you start a protocol, I think is really important. And that's where most people miss the mark. And that's, kind of thinking this through. One of my earlier points around people have this thing that they decide to do, it becomes their niche, and then they start looking for reasons as to why it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. I think that's maybe how that happens, is you don't go in with a clear criteria and it just ends up being something that you enjoy for whatever reason, which is valid. But now you're kind of searching for these strands as to why it is so good, as opposed to going in with those ideas and proving to yourself that, yeah, it does make a difference. Or maybe you didn't notice much of a difference, but you just like doing it anyway. And maybe that's good enough. And I wouldn't discount the power of that. You know what I mean? Like, there are plenty of tasks to do within the day that you have to do. You don't need to keep adding to that arbitrarily. And if something in there is just like, hey, I do this just because it's my thing and I enjoy it, power to you.
And I believe some of the stuff, like, for example, it might make you sleep better. Anybody who's played around in a cold ocean all day long, you sleep like the dead that night. So
sure. Yep.
I can,
there you go.
I can follow the bouncing ball on that one for sure.
Yeah.
And I would, and Julie didn't say this, but I would also say, if you are a recreational CrossFitter, recreational athlete, fitness enthusiast, which I think most of us are, and if you are feeling on a regular day so darn sore and so much muscle pain or aches, like a truck hits you, that you feel like the need for like ice baths because your body is just like, you put it through the ringer. That to me, and I'm not saying this was Julie, but that to me would be like, let's check out some other things that you got going on, because you shouldn't be walking around feeling like that. Either you got to ratchet down the intensity, ratchet down the volume, learn to modulate your intensity, take a rest day, like you said, maybe you're really shortchanging your sleep. Maybe you're eating nothing but Kit Kats. Like, who knows what's going on, but like there's something there. So yeah, I would just take an honest assessment first.
I'll say too, it's funny, the topic of recovery is kind of interesting and another one of those kind of hot buttons these days. And I'm paraphrasing, this is something I've heard over and over and over again from people that are more experienced, wiser, better athletes than me. But it's an amalgamation of things I've heard over and over and over again. And that is, anybody who's truly involved in making people better physical specimens rarely recommend more things to do to recover. Think about that. It's not like, hey, Pat, you need to recover more. Here's a list of 5 more things to do. That's antithetical at the jump, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, I think that's something important to remember too, that if recovery is being thrown around as something that needs to be done, I think there's probably other places to look first before you start adding more things to the list.
I don't know why I'm getting this feeling, but I'm getting this feeling like this is going to be a hot button topic when we post this.
Come on.
I think there's some lines drawn in the sand. I think there's some hardcore plungers out there. You're going to hear from the plungers.
I love it. Like, listen, I don't mean to downplay the fun that can be had with a little bit of cold water. You know what I mean? However, like I said, I think that sometimes you have to take that for what it is. It's something I enjoy. It's something that I want to do. And it can be enough just to do that. It doesn't need a justification in, some maybe less than substantiated claim. And last thing I kind of want to say on that, and to pull way back and not talk about cold plunge or any other specific thing, is that I really believe that, regardless of whether you're just the average person that wants to be fit and healthy, whether you're a CrossFit coach, you're an affiliate owner, or anywhere along that spectrum, I think every individual should take the time and be responsible enough to have a personal ability to discern whether or not they want to adopt a certain something. And what I mean by that is, I don't think it's beyond anybody's reach to have enough basic nutritional understanding, enough basic exercise and workout understanding, and programming understanding to make good decisions about what is actually driving their own personal needle forward. And that puts you in such a powerful position, because we're talking about ice baths today, but a year from now, it's going to be something different. And 10 years from now, it's going to be something different. And what you need to do, you, the individual, is to have that basic knowledge that you can come back to and you can say, no thanks, sounds interesting, but I'm not really there for it, because I have this baseline of knowledge that says, I don't really need it. Look, I'm doing just fine without it. Maybe I'll experiment with that down the line. But if you're trying to claim that it's this critical element that I can't do without, maybe I'm skeptical, because here are the bedrock pieces that I know to be true that I can come back to over and over and over again. And that's what I think is really important for all of us. Have that ability to discern and have that ability to say, okay, you know what? Cool. I'm glad that this is such a popular thing right now. And I hope it's truly beneficial for all the people that get fired up on it. That's great. But I can say no thanks and have no, mark on my conscience around like, oh man, do I have to be engaging in this because it's a hot button thing right now? I think that's really important for people to understand.
I think that'll do it. So, Julie, I don't know if we answered your question, to be quite honest with you, but it was a fun segue into a whole bunch of other things. And the truth is, I did look up and try to figure out like what are the most agreed upon protocols, and there's so many different opinions that I'd be lying to you, Julie, if I said this is the one. So we'll see where this road takes everybody. But as always, hey, if you want to help support the show, go to verynotram.com, check out the cycles. If you're interested in this topic and you have thoughts on cold plunging one way or the other, find this on the btwb YouTube channel and leave your thoughts and comments there on this particular show. And then if you have ideas for a future show or future topic, you can leave them there on the btwb YouTube channel. you can go to Very Not Random's Instagram account and send a direct message that way. There are ways to make it happen because all of you drive the content and we appreciate it. So for Adrian Bosman, I'm Pat Sherwood, and we'll see you next time.